Welcome back to the Explainer. So for those of you who really appreciate the whole tactical chess match that goes on down on the pitch, oh man, you are in for a total treat today. Because look, on the surface, the USA's decisive 4-1 victory over Paraguay, yeah, it just looks like a standard dominant win. But when we actually look past that final scoreline, we uncover this absolute tactical masterclass that's just hidden right there in the data. This wasn't just a win, guys. It was a literal blueprint in spatial control, calculated team formations, and just ruthless ball progression. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this playbook. Here's what we're looking at today. First, the score versus expected goals. Number 2, mastering the midfield engine. Third up, dominating the final third. Then, a tale of two presses. And finally, shifting the defensive blocks.
All right, Section 1, the score versus expected goals. So, to really wrap our heads around the anatomy of this blowout, we've got to address this absolutely fascinating statistical anomaly right off the bat. The United States put 4 goals in the back of the net. Fantastic return, right? But if you look closely at their expected goals, or XG, it sat at just 1.88. Now, usually when a team outscores their XG by that huge of a margin, pundits are instantly like, oh, it's just lucky finishing. But as the data from this match is going to show us, luck? Yeah, luck had very little to do with it.
Which obviously brings us to the pivotal question, right? If the USA didn't just generate this overwhelming volume of high-probability shots to hit that 4-goal mark, how exactly did they dismantle Paraguay so thoroughly? Well, the secret actually lies in the sheer quality of their overall game control.
And it all starts right here. The absolute rock-solid foundation of this blowout was ball control. The USA held a commanding 59.5% of possession. Compare that to Paraguay's meager 28.7% with about 11.8% in contest. I mean, it's pretty simple. If you don't have the ball, you can't dictate the rhythm of the game. The USA just hoarded possession. They forced Paraguay into this reactive, constantly chasing state for the vast majority of the match. And this staggering possession gap, that laid the absolute groundwork for the superior passing we're about to dive into.
Moving on to Section 2, mastering the midfield engine. Now, having the ball is one thing, right? But actually knowing what to do with it to break down your opponent, that's entirely another. Get this, the USA completed 520 passes out of 602 attempts. That gave them an overwhelming 86% pass completion rate. On the flip side, Paraguay, they managed to complete only 234 of their 316 attempts, sitting at a 74% success rate. And the USA wasn't just, lazily passing around the back either. They were progressing the ball with a really high degree of intent and precision. Their fluid team formation allowed them to string together these passing patterns and triangles that Paraguay just literally couldn't disrupt.
So to understand exactly how they pulled this off, we have to zoom in on the micro-level player stats, specifically looking at line breaks. Now, as a refresher, a line break is a pass that completely bypasses a line of the opposition's defensive formation. It's basically the gold standard for offensive progression. Listen to these crazy numbers from the U.S. midfield and backline. Weston McKennie successfully completed 9 of his 10 attempted line breaks. That's an incredible 90% success rate. Tyler Adams hit 17 of 20 for 85%, and Sergino Dest completed 7 of 9 for 78%. They were just meticulously picking apart Paraguay's structure, piece by piece.
And this brilliantly illustrates the macro effect of all that individual precision. The USA successfully sliced through Paraguay's formation with 129 completed line breaks, and Paraguay just a mere 53. Think about that for a second. The USA was essentially bypassing Paraguayan defenders more than twice as often as Paraguay could manage against them. I mean, that right there is exactly how you systematically break down an opponent's shape.
Which leads us into Section 3, dominating the final third. All of those highly successful line breaks from the midfield meant that the USA was just consistently arriving in the sharp end of the pitch with the ball right at their feet. 201. Seriously, I really want that number to sink in for a minute. That 201 represents the total number of completed receptions the USA had in the final third of the pitch.
Let's put that jaw-dropping number into a little perspective. The USA had 201 final third receptions. Paraguay managed 31. 31. That is the literal definition of complete territorial domination. The USA basically built an encampment in Paraguay's defensive zone and turned the match into a relentless siege. And really, this explains exactly why the USA could score 4 goals on that relatively modest 1.88 XG we talked about earlier. They were hanging out in dangerous areas so frequently that Paraguay's defense was just bound to eventually fracture under all that constant pressure.
And the very tip of that attacking spear, that was Fuller and Balogun.
His impact was just so direct and significant. He found the back of the net right in the 49th minute, proving exactly how methodical left-foot ball progression creates these absolutely lethal scoring opportunities. Plus, he had other key involvements sprinkled all throughout the match, at the 31st, the 45+5, and the 72nd minutes. Balogun totally demonstrated how those targeted entries into the final third directly translate into actual scoreboard impact.
All right, let's move to Section 4, a tale of two presses.
Now, let's shift our focus a bit and talk about what happens when these teams don't have the ball. Think about how Paraguay's defensive effort completely dwarfs the USA's in terms of pure numbers. Paraguay went all in on this frantic, high-volume pressing strategy. They racked up 360 total defensive pressures compared to the USA's 204. Honestly, if you were just looking at the sheer volume here, you'd probably assume Paraguay was the team dictating the game through pure defensive hustle. But wait, here is the crucial plot twist. Despite Paraguay applying nearly twice as much defensive pressure, it was actually the United States who forced more turnovers, 50 to Paraguay's 49. The USA applied 150 fewer pressures, but generated the exact same, actually slightly better, defensive output. No way, right?
So the crucial point here is that the USA was working much, much smarter, not harder. They conserved their physical energy while completely maximizing their defensive disruption. Basically, Paraguay ran themselves totally ragged pressing the ball, while the USA just casually chose exactly the right moments to bite, and that yielded far, far greater efficiency.
Okay, final section, number 5. Shifting the defensive blocks.
You see, the USA's defensive efficiency wasn't just about individual tackling. It was about this absolutely brilliant structural organization. Before we get into the exact data, let's just make sure we're all on the same page here. A defensive block refers to the tactical positioning of a team when they do not have the ball. It's categorized by the height of their defensive lines, so high, mid, or low, and it's used to compress the field, effectively shrinking the amount of space the opposition has to operate in. And throughout this match, the USA coaching staff made some brilliant adjustments to compress that field. In a high block, the USA's length from front to back was 50 meters. In a mid-block, they tightened that up to 39 meters, but check out their low block. The entire team compressed into a suffocating 15-meter length. That's basically the size of a large living room, guys. By squeezing their formation that unbelievably tight, they virtually eliminated all operating space between the lines for any of Paraguay's attackers.
Now, what you really need to take away from this is how that incredibly compact structure paid massive dividends. Because the USA was so well positioned, their average ball recovery time was a lightning-fast 11.23 seconds. Compare that to Paraguay, who took an average of 17.37 seconds to recover the ball. And look, in modern football, a 6-second difference in recovery time, that is an absolute eternity. The USA's structural discipline just allowed them to win the ball back way faster, which immediately refueled their dominant possession game and started the whole cycle all over again.
Which ultimately leaves us with this final thought. We literally saw Paraguay run themselves into the ground with 360 pressures, and it yielded nothing but a pretty lopsided loss. Meanwhile, the USA utilized this tight, compact block, incredibly efficient passing, and calculated defensive strikes to just completely dominate every single phase of the game. So, as analytics continue to evolve, are we actually witnessing the end of the frantic high-volume press in favor of this hyper-calculated positional efficiency? It's a genuinely fascinating shift in the modern game. Keep an eye out for these metrics the next time you watch a match. You'll seriously see a whole different game unfolding right beneath the final scoreline. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.